Welcome to Lacrosse Live with Harvard head coach Jerry Byrne. He is sending out a quick note to all his followers to jump on. We're going to try to answer questions. There's a bunch of questions on Twitter. So if that's easier for you, feel free on that. And then you can also ask questions on this Facebook, and I will be able to go back.
I got the J. Munro Pantheon behind me. I think there's no picture of me going over your head and trying to go over your head like Placid. Isn't that
No,
it? Right?
I'm working on that one. I'm going to make sure that happens.
That was like the frightening thing is that you and I are both pretty healthy and pretty active. That like in your mind you think it looks one way, but it actually looks like two fat guys bumping into each other.
No, I've watched the video of that. I actually, my dad was on his phone, and so I'll send it to you. I actually have that video of me not being able to run 3 steps above GLE before you go right over my head.
There were two certainties in that thing. I was going to try to take the ball away from you, and you were going to go to the cage. It was like Rocky 73. What's going on?
How you doing?
Doing.
Yeah.
There's nothing else to do but to do something.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely crazy, insane. I want to hear how things are going, but in light of the fact that there was some kind of an announcement or a pending announcement, did you see that?
I did.
So the NCAA is talking about, it seems appropriate, they say, to grant spring sports another year of eligibility. What are your quick thoughts on that?
I think the NCAA should be lauded for making that decision in a timely manner. So I think from an administration standpoint, you're happy for the speed with which they were able to recognize how emotional it was for these players to lose, a portion of their season. So a high percentage of athletes, who may have the capability academically and financially to stay and play for an extra year, either now or in the future. I think that's a great thing that the NCAA was able to do that quickly. But I'm sure they've also factored in that this is not going to be applied equally to every league and every school, and also it's not everybody's going to be able to do it, from whether it's seniors who've accepted jobs or have other obligations. And I don't think they've explained what the implications might be from a scholarship or financial aid standpoint, but I assume those questions will be answered at some point, and they'll be dealt with on an individual basis with those families and those players.
I've got 2 kids in college playing college lacrosse right now, and I'm so happy to hear this. Literally, I was like in a week of just seemingly never-ending bad news, and on top of more bad news, which realistically there may be more to come. This was just like a nice little bright spot. I do foresee there being a lot of challenges with this, as great as it is and is selfishly so great. On the one hand, for my son and my daughter, they're in college. I have a daughter who's a 2021, and for the next 4 years, there's going to be 5 classes, which is pretty kind of daunting in some ways, even if you are so psyched for everybody to have it back, because how do you deal with roster caps and money and all of that? It's going to be kind of interesting to see how that plays out.
And, the option, within the Ivy League, there's rules that are Ivy based. There are rules that are institution based that vary between teams in our league. And, so it's going to put, some pressure on those institutions' interpretations of their own policies. The lack of clarity within our league around potential next steps provides opportunities for, these other schools who are looking around and you looked at, the quality of the seasons that teams in our league were having and the wins that we all had over top programs is, we don't know what to tell our players right now about what they can and cannot do relative to this new announcement that just came out 30 minutes ago from the NCAA. So that the lack of clarity and the lack of certainty around that for student athletes in the Ivy League, I don't know if it's the same elation, because I think each member of those teams from, Yale, Princeton, Harvard, Dartmouth, Penn, Cornell, Harvard, if you gave them a choice, they want to stay with their team. They want to stay at their school. And that may not be an outcome for each one of those athletes, but that may become a boon to, schools who aren't in the Ivy League. But I think you're exactly right. You can't always, it's the law of unintended consequences. The fact that you're going to have, 4 years of, guys with extra years, the financial implications of that, and, the challenges of a gluttony of talent.
Oh,
not only a gluttony of talent, but potential talent from other schools,
right,
when they transfer. And you can't always predict how that might affect your culture, not just the affordability and the digestion of talent, but how do you integrate that talent? How do you bring, new people into your program? That's not, obviously it's less of an issue within the Ivy League because transferring is so difficult. But, I think you want to be careful with your relation if you're a certain kind of school, because, the unintended consequences are waiting for you in the future.
Whenever you think, I just remember always thinking, man, if we could just take our freshman class and have kept last year's senior class, we'd be so good. And that's actually what's going to happen now,
right? For
a lot of years. But
an extra year with Andy Towers and Dave Evans, you get the talent, but also you get some of the other stuff too.
Yeah, no doubt. I don't know, maybe they ought to just give every high school player another year too, and let's just set everybody back 1 year and start over next year, and all the 20s become 21s, the 22s become 23s, and so on and so forth.
What I've tried to do is, when everything is out of control, you try to lean on the things that you can control. So we've, within our staff, we've tried to, keep on our daily schedule and our same, procedures and things. We're trying to feed that hole in our lives about coaching and, trying to avoid the uncertainty of what this means for recruiting, and because we don't know and we don't control it. And so we're like everybody else waiting for the shoe to fall regarding what this means for recruiting and what this means for your eligibility and what this means for your future teams. It can be really stressful, and it is, for all the different parents and kids and the student athletes on your team. But to help minimize that, what we've done is we're trying to compete. We're getting out on the basketball court and squash courts here, and we're trying to have our meetings, and we're watching lacrosse, whether it's on old games or some of our own games, so we can continue to keep our skills fresh, because that's what we're going to expect of our own players.
Yeah, interesting. Can you share with us what the Ivy League rules are as it relates to? And who knows, maybe you guys will get a waiver, but generally it's hard for Ivy kids to take their 5th year at their Ivy school. Why is that?
There's no graduate school, grad students, can't compete in the Ivy League.
That's it.
And they're frowning upon, which is right. They don't want people withdrawing and trying to save their years. And, they want people who are in their academic year to continue to make that progress toward the completion of this year, or completion of their degree. The majority of the schools in our league have semester limitations, that you can only be, a student athlete at your campus for 8 semesters. And so that, those 2 limitations, put, a constraint on, not an impossibility, because I think there's going to be ongoing conversations within our league relative to this announcement. But each of the, most of the teams in our league have a semester limitation. I know most of them. I'm not going to speak specifically on that. But that makes it a non-starter unless the league and the university presidents make an exception or an exemption relative to that.
So when are your athletes? Everyone's got to go home. When are your athletes out of there?
They're required. I think Harvard was one of the first universities, if not the first university, to make a hard date of when they had to leave campus. Harvard is 99.9% residential. So our students and student athletes live in community, in the houses and in Harvard Yard, and they are required to be gone by 5 o'clock tomorrow night.
So you're doing your end of the year wrap up meetings with them right now, or?
No, those are more kind of organic because the guidelines from the university is social distancing and to avoid these big group meetings for the safety, less the safety, as less the safety of our student athletes because they're young and healthy and they may be exposed to this, but they have a lower, mortality rate relative to the rest of the universe. So it's more about how it may affect their parents and grandparents and things like that. So we are following those guidelines, but guys are trickling in to clean out their lockers and take their personal items from campus. So they're stopping in and you're having brief conversations with them. So yeah, I guess technically you are having end of year meetings, but they're out of respect for their health and safety and their families and loved ones. We're minimizing them as much as possible.
I want to hear your opinion on that because I've got kids that are going to be coming home soon, and the kids aren't that afraid of it right now. Maybe they should be more afraid than they are. Maybe they shouldn't. Maybe none of us should. I don't really know. But the whole concept of social distancing and slowing the spread of this thing, with all the kids coming home, it puts a difficult burden on them. They're not used to sort of having these controlled parameters. I mean, nobody is, but I kind of feel like, older people might be a little bit more okay with just sitting at the desk and working from home, whereas the kids aren't really like that. What is your advice to your students as it relates to the responsibility, that they have?
I think every generation of that age think how they see the world is how they see the world. Whether it's, if you think back to maybe our generation when we were in our early to mid 20s and Magic Johnson, announced that he had AIDS, that was a seminal moment, I think, for our generation. Not that we were unaware of that disease, but it hadn't struck, as awful as that was, and it was bigger than Magic Johnson. It was almost that moment was when that happened. Magic Johnson and Rock Hudson, who was an actor, famous actor from the mid 20th century. Those two things. Wow, if these icons can contract this disease, then we can all get it in some way. So it's almost like whether it's the announcement of someone famous like Tom Hanks or the NBA players that have tested positive, it's that makes it even more real because it's a celebrity society now, and so I think pretty quickly they've gotten out of their kind of narrow view of what it means to them, as a team, as an athlete, and having your season removed and curtailed and ended. I think pretty quickly they're seeing that this is bigger and beyond them. And whether they still have that kind of bulletproof mentality, you would probably know better than I because your kids are a little bit younger than mine. But I think they're starting to realize that it's bigger than them. It's bigger than their season. It's bigger what it means to them losing their season when people are losing their lives. And so I think that's what they're coming to reality with. As far as kind of what we're doing, we're once they go home, I think we're going to try to do the best we can to mimic their day that they would have when they were here. They're going to be taking their classes on Zoom and, going through their day. And then, they're going to be working out and sweating and, and probably connecting with their teammates electronically and if allowed, maybe with our coaching staff electronically. So we're going to try to mimic that as much as possible because your body's going to be demanding that. And that's good for your own stress and anxiety around what this all means for you.
How about the Rock Hudson reference? I haven't heard about Rock Hudson since last time I watched the Flintstones. I think there was a Rock Hudson character on the Flintstones.
That was too easy, my mom, who recently passed away, and my mom was a huge movie fan, and she taught me about all the great actors from the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and
I was going to say,
I've made my children watch some of my favorite movies, and the problem is that in the modern movies, somebody's getting killed or blown up, or something else happening every 15 minutes. In those movies, the dialogue and the subtle gestures were everything, and obviously Rock Hudson was a quite a fixture of that time. So yeah,
kind of reminds me of the situation we're in now. It's like unlike the Ivy League now, back in the day, Freddie Twinkletoes Flintstone did get to go back for an extra year of eligibility.
At Princeton.
Played the Princeton versus Shale game.
Nice. Well played. Yeah. For anybody under the age of 40, the Flintstones was a cartoon TV show.
It was a good one. My problem right now is I have an itch on my nose, and it's driving me insane.
All right. Well, put your hand over the camera.
I can't. I mean, I just have to set a good example here. Cough it in the sleeve. Don't try my nose. People who know me, social distancing is not a problem. I'm not as friendly as I appear. So that's not. I've been living by myself here in Boston for 7 months. So I've been doing my own social distancing. It reminds me of a. Oh, never mind. I'm not going to go down that path. That's a story that we can hold on to for later. So, want me to go to some of the questions that were
Sure.
on our Twitter? All right. How about this from Chris Garland, coach at Detroit Country Day? What are your tried and true drills for Harvard lacrosse?
We've only been here for a certain amount of time, Chris. So I don't know if we've had any tried and true drills yet, but I did.
They're repurposed Notre Dame lacrosse drills.
Yeah. I think one of probably my most consistent drill over the last 3 or 4 years has been a drill that I call Simon Says. And, everyone's always talking about how important communication is. But there's not a lot of drills where you can do that because you need to practice being loud and decisive and directive like any other skill. And it's particularly hard for young players to tell older players what to do. And the only way you can get used to doing that is making them do it. And so,
come on, guys, talk.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't hear anything. And so, but also, the using simple 1 and 2 syllable words that are really evocative and provocative and descriptive, and talk about roles and situations sometimes simultaneously. So I think there's a video of that somewhere floating around the internet from my previous life. So Chris, you might want to look up Simon Says. I can't remember if I spelled it S-E-Z or S-A-Y-S, but it's out there, and it's something that we probably did 4 days a week, 5 days a week here at Harvard, and you can customize it to a future opponent. You can focus it on just a couple of different terms. And as I told when I coached at Notre Dame, and since I coached at Harvard, that I want to be able to, if I had the sound off, if I was videoing the drill and I looked at it, I should be able to tell what the direction that the person who's giving the instruction, I should be able to figure out what you'd be telling them, even if the sound was off. Because there's a reaction, there's a using your teammate's name. There's an instruction and a direction, and then there's a reaction. And I should, with the sound off, I should be able to tell what word and what instruction was being used. So good question, Chris. And loved your commentary on the face-off, by the way. He'll know what I mean.
All right. This one from Nick Beatty.
Beetle.
That's a blast from this fast. I remember watching that kid running around.
Oh my God, the king of that. Nick Beatty was the king of the sky whammy.
He was, man.
He may have invented the sky whammy.
I mean, I used to love his game back. He was a Columbus kid, right? What high school did he go to?
Columbus, Kilbourne, Worthington Kilbourne.
Worthington Kilbourne.
He, Brian Fisher and I, when we both started that first in August 2006 at Notre Dame. Brian Fisher is now the head coach at Monmouth University. Is that that whole class we basically recruited off of highlight videos. So Sean Rogers and Max Pfeiffer and Kevin Randall and Nick Beatty, guys who became captains and ridiculous players at Notre Dame. Beatty's first minute of his highlights were him sky whamming. For anybody who doesn't know what a sky whammy is, Nick Beatty would get up to the island and fake a jump shot, either up the hash or off of a question mark, and the defenseman would turn around and chase the shot or the pass, and he'd walk in behind him. And I'm 99% sure Nick Beatty's high school highlight tape is somewhere on YouTube. So if you can find that, but that was the first minute of his tape, and I was like, man, I think we got to have that guy. And he became a great player and a captain at Notre Dame.
I don't know why more people don't do that, by the way, because I mean, basically it's like a hidden ball trick, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with a little, hidden ball trick on man up, or you see the Canadians doing that during substitutions, and there's nothing lost if it doesn't work. It usually doesn't work, but every now and then it gets you a free goal, and sometimes a big one.
Now,
these types of sky whammies are basically hidden ball tricks. I mean,
he would also do stuff like, Chris Paul would do, particularly as Chris Paul is getting older. Like say you and I are trying to play two-man in basketball, and Chris, Nick Beatty used to do the same thing on lacrosse fields. Like I'd have the ball and I'd point at you like I'm trying to get you to set a pick for me, and get as soon as the guy looked
pick here and go the other way.
Turn it over the other way. He was the king of it, of splitting guys off to that, because 50% of the time the guy would look, and it actually helped fuel my whole mentality around defense, which was never look at the pick. If you're okay with switching, never look at the pick. And so, but then all these teams started falling down on picks, and that became a whole other thing. But so Nick had a question somewhere.
Yeah, we got a little distracted there. Okay, ready? What do you foresee as changes for high school juniors and seniors relative to COVID?
We just had a compliance meeting this morning, and yes, you're looking at schools who are going to do distance learning, and that works up to a point. What if you're in my daughter's in medical school, and there's a certain amount of learning that you do by doing that. Anatomy lab is really hard to work on a cadaver when you're looking at it on a video screen. And so I think some of those same challenges that universities are under, I think they're particularly similar for high schools. And so what is that going to mean for graduation and if that's going to be held off, or but I think a lot of them do stuff electronically through, is it Blackboard or Whiteboard or whatever, how some of the teachers put their notes and can do some of that stuff. So, but not every school is wired that way. Not everyone has a smart classroom or smart boards or the capability of doing that stuff. So I don't know what it's going to mean for the seniors who obviously need to graduate to enroll at a place like Harvard. I don't know what it means for them, so I definitely don't know what it means for the 2021s.
He had one more question. What's a rule that we're still getting wrong right now?
I think I think the face-off and the dive are, they simply put, they took a rule, the dive, that they couldn't consistently get right, made it more complex, and expected to get it right more. So, you know, it's so that I would be shocked if that wasn't revamped or something simpler for the referees. The game is so damn fast now that it's hard for those guys to be in position to determine where was, what angle was he pushed? Did he step on the line? When did he hit the goalie? Where was the ball? Where did he land? Did he land and roll? When he landed, was the ball passed before the contact? You know what I mean? There's so many moving parts that I think if you gave them the Zapruder film and broke it down frame by frame, they still might not be able to get it right 85% of the time. So
that sounds like the NFL and the pass interference.
Yeah, I just think
I mean, they can't.
And by the way, they have probably 15 cameras trained on the play,
I know.
and still, don't get it right every time. So the complexity of all that stuff going on, and you only have 3 guys out there, and there's sometimes because of the speed of the play or where the defender and the goalie and the guy with the ball are, it's impossible. And
what's your fix though? I mean, to me, it's like just let it be like pro rules. Just let them dive and just decide whether they got the shot off before the foot was in the crease.
Whatever it is, simplicity has got to be the rule, because complexity is not the way to go. And relative to the face-off, and it's less about you have a good guy if someone else has a better guy. I just think that they're missing jumps. They're not calling the turns. Remember when that was supposed to be a thing? The number of turns that you have after you win the clamp. Remember when that was a rule?
Yeah.
That's not being called. The movement, like I'm a referee and I'm backing up and I'm supposed to do the mechanic where I'm moving, blowing the whistle, and I'm trying to determine which one of those guys moved first. And did they move? Did they move relative to me moving? And what about, remember when you couldn't look up? Remember when that was going to be a thing? Guys are looking up all over the place. And as I tell referees every time, do you think he's looking up because he's losing? I mean, you're not supposed to be able to look up. He's looking up to figure out where he can put the ball. That means he has the clamp. That means he's trying to figure out where he can escape. So it's another one of those things that, I don't know what the solution is, but it has less to do whether good guy, bad guy, or this guy's controlling too much of the game. I really, you got to strategize against that, and it's been proven that you can. But I just don't think the referees can call that consistently either. It's not anti-referee. I just think it's crazy difficult. I
agree. Listen, I think it was better when the refs went like this and you could look. I think it was better when you just kind of let it be a free-for-all in there. And it was more of the best face-off guys were still the best face-off guys, but there was a little gamesmanship to it. And, who cares? Just let those guys just go battle it out. I mean, I think the main thing nobody really likes is to see somebody always win 75% of the face-offs. And even though Greg the Beast, would just rip that comment to shreds, and I respect that. But I also I just think we like to have things, closer to 50-50 where you could still make a big play, but it wasn't a foregone conclusion. Because right now, when it's 28 out of 31 faceoffs, it's just, to me, it kind of spoils a game. So that's just my take.
Right.
My cold take.
Those are my 2 things.
Yeah.
Nick and I'd love to see Nick Beattie. Nick Beattie's the man. One of my all-time favorite guys.
I mean, I never knew him, but I remember. All right, Jeremy Darren, can't really tell how you pronounce it. Hey, Jerry from West Genesee.
I think Jeremy coach. I think Jeremy was a college coach somewhere.
Yeah. OCCQ's Limestone, and now West Genny is where he's coaching, and he wants to know about practice tempo. And what do you do to maintain the energy to get the most out of the last 30 minutes of practice, kind of like the fourth quarter?
So was part of the question about practice tempo?
Yes.
I think it's obviously easier at the college level, but you definitely want to. One of the things that we do is that we have a Google Doc here, and we're constantly adding to, hey, we need to work on that, or let's talk about that, and where do we fit that in when we're putting our practice plan together. So you have your time block on an electronic document, and then to the right of it is all these topics: end of games, different ground ball drills, small sided stuff, and then you're cutting and pasting as you're building your practice plan. So I think the creation of tempo at practice is a function of how you put the puzzle pieces of your practice together to make sure that it makes sense to your guys. And it's particularly hard in high school. I've coached at the high school level, and I know you have as well, Jamie, that you have this big palette of all the things that you want to teach, but you guys, have 2 weeks of practice maybe before your first scrimmage and 3 weeks before your first game, maybe, that you have to be even more frugal and circumspect with how you build your practice plan. But I think tempo is based on practice plan. It's also based on the simplicity and the ease with which you can transition from one thing to another, so you don't waste time setting up drills. So the more that you can create a drill bank, either through YouTube or a private, website where you're sharing these things with your players, because the more you can go from, we're doing this today, and then be out on the field and get to it quickly and have it clear what the teaching and the objectives of the drill are, that helps drive tempo, because there's nothing worse than a coach spending 15 minutes setting up a drill that you're going to do for 6 minutes. And I think that happens a lot at the college level. I know I've fallen into that trap myself as well. So ease of drill setup, clarity of drill objective, anything you can do with your players and your staff before they get on the field that makes that transition easy. And how do you keep the intensity and the pace at practice is obviously how all those different pieces come together in a practice plan. And it's also culture, relying on your players. As I tell my players all the time, I'll go, if your energy is driven by my intensity, then we don't have a great culture and we don't know how to work hard, because I can do that every day, but then I'll be the only guy driving that. It'll be contingent upon what I'm doing, when the energy and the effort and the emotion should be coming from you, not from me. I played in college already. My time is gone. This is your time.
Long gone.
Long gone.
One of the things I think that you've always done really well is that you've sort of built upon your drills. And, I think a mistake that some coaches do is they just have too many different drills. And it's like, what you really need to do is get some core drills that work for you. And then you can layer on some of the new things that you might want to do. And they'll evolve, and the kids will know exactly what they are. And part of the evolution is that you can't teach them 80,000 things on the first time. You just got to get them to, if you're doing 32 lunch pail, it's like, let's get the right spacing. Let's get our dodgers on the perimeter giving us a couple of dodges, and let's focus on approach for the on ball and stance off ball. Let's sort of leave it at that, instead of getting into every detail of what you might say and exactly how to do it. You kind of have to get it going, right?
Yeah, you have to have a foundation of the things that you kind of believe in, with certainty and clarity. And you're exactly right. Once you have that, then you have these 5 to 10 drills that are all the time drills, and you can create modifications off of them. So you mentioned 32 lunch pail. So you can customize that to your opponent. You're playing we did 32 lunch pail, getting ready for Fairfield, and they had a couple of really talented lefties. So we're getting a lot of butt end jabs and split and walk the dog and step away. So you can customize the drill based on your opponent as well. And then you're exactly right. You can add a sliding component. You can add a communications component. You can add a slide and recovery, a double team component. You hit the nail on the head. And so now, going back to the earlier point to Jeremy Durin's question, was now you don't have, you have a core drill that you're just modifying for this day. And you take, you spend 45 seconds talking about the modification instead of the 10 minutes on the setup. And what I've come to realize, as I've gotten older, is don't search for perfect reps. If the choice is 3 perfect reps, but not a lot of reps, but 25 reps with 3 of them being perfect, I'll do the second one. Because now you can, whether it's using film or huddle or telestrations, you can contrast the perfect with the imperfect and use that as a teaching moment that says, this is why this wasn't good enough, this drop step, or you wound up the check, or you stood up straight. That's a chance to teach, which is going to not, the guy who's doing it perfect, he can now be not only the exemplar of how to do it right, but he can also help the guy who's doing it imperfectly do it better next time. And that's culture.
One thing I got to show you, talk about drill banks. So for anybody that's looking for something like that, there's an endless amount of content in here for people that are looking for any virtual type of coaching.
Very cool.
Yeah, it is good stuff. So speaking of that, I love building content, and I am a self-proclaimed disciple of Jerry Byrne's defense. So I spent a couple of years just like, first of all, inviting him to clinics, going to practices, talking on the phone. And then I was a high school coach, coaching defense. I was like, I want to put this defense in. I just would send you little videos or send you a picture of like all my guys sideways with, being like, how about that? And I learned a lot, and it was really cool. And I've continued to be interested in it, and I've created a lot of content around that. But but I always knew Jerry was holding back a little bit, just because, you have to, you can't always give away your secrets, right, GB?
Yeah. There's always left room for, always left room for doubt, or,
That's right.
There was something missing.
You can always leave a little bit out. And so one of the things is Jerry had told me, in a coach's clinic, he had these seven sins of the defense, things you don't do. And one of them is never square up to the ball until you're sliding. So that makes perfect sense to me, because I'm like, well, you should be sideways. I get it. See your man in the ball. But it wasn't until I was doing an interview of Eddie Glazner that he goes, I know for a fact that if Landis squares up to the ball, he's going. And I was like, that's what that was all about. And it was like literally one of the most interesting things I've learned in the last 6 months or a year about being able to, it's read and make your next decisions. It's just phenomenal concepts. And, I was psyched to be able to piece that together a little.
Those guys, it's so rewarding to hear those guys and have them talk about it and how connected they all are. And all those guys who played on the Redwoods was a really cool thing. I got to go to one of their games last year, and Nat St. Laurent was nice enough to have me down on the sideline and be in the locker room. And, he's like, oh, come into the locker room. The game was at Hopkins. And I'm like, dude, if you invite me any closer, I'll be grabbing the whiteboard and, taking over your halftime thing. And I think that might get me fired from my job. So, but no, it's, Eddie was a special, kind of student, and, just has become a great player because he's found that way to marry his intellect and his verbal acuity with his athleticism. And that's, it's the product of all 3 of those things that has made him one of the best defensemen. And if I was, building a national team, that would be a guy that I would take, because, they always, on these teams or any all-star team or thing like that, they always want to take the massive athletic cover guy who isn't always that dedicated to playing great off-ball defense. They're worried about getting caught on film, with their guy scoring much more than they care about getting a stop. And I think, at both Harvard and Notre Dame, believed in creating that micro community of guys who just cared about the stop, because you either got the stop or you don't. Who cares whether you got a takeaway check that you didn't get the ball, or who cares, that you blew a guy up and you were late on your slide, and that's what you did. You decided to blow him up because you were late and get a penalty. So, I mean, I think creating a culture of defense requires a mentality around selflessness and interconnectedness and interdependence that you build over time. And I'm, obviously proud of the group that I was able to coach for 13 years at Notre Dame, but probably as proud of just, sadly, the 7 months that we were together here at Harvard. I wish I had time to tell you all the things that they did on their own. They connected with my Notre Dame guys, both the close defensemen, long stick middies, D middies, because they wanted to know what they knew to speed up their development here and embracing what we were trying to do. And we had made great progress in defensive efficiency and goals against. And, it's sad that I won't see where that will go for the next month and a half to 2 months. But, I'll remember these guys forever, because they took an infrastructure and, used the relationships with the Notre Dame guys and used technology and completely embraced what we were trying to do. I'm sad, but also proud.
We just got a little note from Dave Katowski throwing out the Chaminade connection and Levittown and East Meadow boys.
Yes.
You guys had to have been like, Bloods and Crips back then, East Meadow.
I'm trying to think. What year was Dave a year behind? What year did Dave graduate from
my class? Me and Dave were roommates senior year at Brown.
What year is that?
89 at Brown.
All right, so he was a freshman at Chaminade when I was a senior. So I may or may not have stubbed him in a locker at some point.
Oh yeah, I'm sure you gave him a massive wedgie, but
Levittown and East Meadow were separated by Hempstead Turnpike and Newbridge Road. And so, but Dave was not a guy that I would, mess with lightly. So he may have thrown me in a locker when I was a senior. I weighed 135 pounds, and Dave was a little bit thicker and more, I'm not saying he was on HGH, but he could have been back in the early 80s.
I really would like to see, I just need a picture of you from back in the day. I just want to see you probably had, you're like 6'3", 6'6" with your afro, kind of like Fletch.
And it makes $3 million a year, earns every nickel of it. We're going to fight for that rebound. Two things guys would say about me. I didn't play. I played 2 years of high school lacrosse. My junior year, I didn't play for a second at Chaminade. That story is well worn. Jack Moran totally kept me on that team because my brother was a starting defenseman at Virginia at that time. He knew I wasn't adopted because we looked very similar. But my senior year, they called me the rubber chicken because I was so skinny. And one of the other seniors would say, "Bernsey, stick out your tongue. You look like a zipper." And so, yeah, but I was 139 pounds my senior year.
No way.
At Chaminade. And
what was your favorite song?
I was not striking fear into the hearts of men.
What was your favorite song back then in 1980?
In 1982, my senior spring, Jay Giles' centerfold was huge. I think, Iran by maybe Flock of Seagulls. New Wave was blowing up, and I know you're big into music and documentaries. There's an unbelievable documentary on Netflix about WLIR, which was the New Wave new music radio station on Long Island. So, New York was the port of entry for, a lot of things physically and culturally. And there's I think it's called Dare to Be Different. And because that was the tagline for WLIR. And so that's where, I was listening to a lot of the Clash back then. And so the Clash, the Cure, was also way
English beat.
into what's that?
The English beat.
English beat, XTC. But it's funny. I was talking to this with one of my UMass buddies recently, and I also had an 8-track, so I was listening to cassettes, and I know we're dating ourselves. The 8-track was
8-track, baby.
You've seen pictures, but I bought 3 before in August of 1982, as I was leaving to go to college. The last 3 8-tracks I ever bought, and I'm going to lay that on you.
What were they?
Elvis Costello.
Yeah.
This year's model, I think, is the name of the album. Has a bunch of great songs on it. Never Mind the Bollocks. This is the Sex Pistols, and Ian Hunter and Mott the Hoople's Greatest Hits, which is just a bizarre, eclectic combo. So
did you have
meanwhile, surprisingly, I didn't date much. Did you
have an 8-track player in your Camaro?
I had an 8-track player in my freshman dorm, 100%.
What about in your Camaro parked out front? That's when I was talking to Scotty.
I did not have my driver's license yet. I was like one of the last people. I had a Schwinn. I drove around out of town, and but I didn't have a car. I didn't have my license yet.
Do you have a banana seat on that thing?
But not. I can't remember. Possibly.
I remember telling Scotty Hiller when I was visiting you guys last September, and he's like, "Does Jerry have his Camaro parked up front?"
For an Irish American guy, there wasn't a lot of Camaros. My oldest brother Thomas, who was a New York City fireman, he had a Cougar XR7. This was the most Guido car. It was brown and black, had the headlight things that popped up like this. It had a little oval window in the back. You could get like 9 Levitclowns in this car, 9 Levitalians in this car. It was huge. You could have 4 people along the back seat. And
that was back when you could call shotgun and Shogun, which was the middle seat in the front seat.
Yes, 100%. 100% Shogun, exactly.
Shogun.
I haven't heard that in a while. But my brother had this massive car. So there were no Camaros. My dad had a Monte Carlo, which was a real Guido car that we used to bust my dad about. So, but I ended up getting the Ford Granada ultimately as my first car that my father got from a fellow fireman for $50. And that I subsequently nicknamed the Crab, because the alignment, we would go, doing stuff in the snow and your car would hit the curb, and the alignment, if you let go of the wheel, the car drove sideways. So I called it the Crab.
I like it. All right, Robert Anderson, coach, what's the important aspect you evaluate in a defenseman after footwork? Their ability to play selfless in Team D, stick skills? What is it?
I think, with the 20, I used to never really care about stick skills very much, but after we have struggled to clear for most of our season this year, I've already realized how important the stick piece is with the new clearing rules. But, I think what I look for the most is the compete level that they have when they're on the ball and when they have the ball. Do they have, within a standard deviation based on the coaching and maybe some of the things that they've been taught, do they have that same compete level off the ball? Because everybody wants to run with the ball because everybody's watching them. And so when I watch guys be unbelievably athletic with the ball, and I see a huge chasm between that and how they work on the ball and how they work off the ball, I'm like, man, that disconnection I might not be able to get past that, And so is that a personality thing? Is that a character thing? Have they not been taught? So I grade you on a curve within that. But if there's a narrow gap between how they cover and how they work and their stance and how they communicate and react when they're off the ball, not just when they're sliding. And if they're good when they're sliding and they work hard on the ball, do they work hard in some of the secondary off-ball roles? I really look for that. It doesn't necessarily mean if they don't do that well, I'll I'll grade that on a curve that maybe they haven't been taught how to do that yet. But I see guys walking around in that role, and then all of a sudden they pop into, high motor mode when they're one pass away. I'll judge that kind of harshly.
Yeah. Well, and plus, I mean, it's just it's what you always talk about is, you can steal some seconds back if you work your tail off out there, whether it's when your man passes it or if you're 2 passes away or whatever.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I talk about to the guys I've coached, and we definitely harped on it here at Harvard is, if you can ride pretty well, whether it's, riding to sub or actual pressure rides, and you can get your opponent down to a 45-second functional possession. And now if you steal some seconds, either with ball pressure or recovery footwork or slide preparation or how you make approaches on guys, if you do that 7 or 8 times, you can kill half of that 45 seconds. And now you're screwing with the offense's fluidity and their comfort level, and you're forcing to certain kind of dodges at certain kind of angles, and so I think it's really important for a coach to accept the fact that this generation wants to know why, which I don't fight against that, but you try to find ways to use it. Is I always talk to guys about the cost and benefits of doing and not doing things. And because they're smart and they want to, if you create a culture where guys want to work hard and really care about their team, then say, like, the cost of not doing this is this, this, and this. Your skip lane is gigantic versus narrow. His view of the field is this, narrow versus massive because of ball pressure and what you do with that of your stick. So I think and you got to do it continually, the more they understand that, they get it. They want to be good teammates. They want their team to be successful. They want to help you get the stop into a possession for your offense. So I think about that a lot. I think about articulating why you do things and what the benefit of it is. And, and when I do film and tell illustrations with my players, I'm always showing them, because why things happen bad mostly on possessions is usually not something that happens just in that moment. It's usually a layering of small mistakes that lead to a big, opportunity for your offense. Now, listen, sometimes your offense just make great plays, and I always say, can they make 10 great plays? If you make your opponent score on great plays, you have a really good chance to win. And so, but I'm always talking about the cost benefit of doing what you've been taught versus not doing it well enough.
All right, I got a question for you. So, as far as the why, you want to explain why. So, and I've always repeated one of the things that I know you teach, which is like the concept of your lead poke. I think what I kind of learned over the course of time is that there's a lot of different scenarios where you're about to engage with the ball. Sometimes it's in a rotation. Sometimes it's on a skip pass. Sometimes it's you're going to play the best dodging attackman in Division I behind the net, but you don't have to run out to him because he's behind the net. Where do you sort of talk about lead poke versus, hey, I really got to be ready to move and get my hands on this guy? Because I feel like if you're going to try to cover a Jordan Wolf or a Lyle Thompson and you just put your stick out, they can like basically put you in a tough spot where you might not get your hands on them. Right. But I wanted you to maybe explain that detail if you could.
I think you start with, when you're teaching technique, you usually teach it in its most perfect environment and most perfect scenario, so that they understand what it feels like and what it looks like, what the benefit is. But you mentioned earlier a drill that that a lot of teams do. I call it 32 lunch pail, and you have 3 dodgers on the perimeter and 2 defensemen inside that triangle, and you have the guys on the perimeter do different moves based on maybe your opponent or maybe the most consistent moves that high school or college guys do. So we would do that, so after you've already taught what you want the perfect technique to be, and where's my wrist, where are my hands on the stick, how far is my elbow away from the body, I call it becoming the zombie. Are your hands way over your feet, which gives you length, but doesn't give you balance? Are your hands in close and you're an alligator and, you can't, you're T-Rex, you can't do these things. So, trying to find for each guy what his ideal angle and where his hands and elbows are. So after you teach that, you then teach that, using a drill like 32 lunge pail is you can now teach, you change the shape of the triangle. So if you're on the perimeter and Joe Blow is on the perimeter and Jim Smith's on the perimeter, I might change the shape of the triangle where, hey, we're going to say the approach to Jamie is he's catching the ball at GLE and, we're worried about a rocker or an inside roll. And, Joe Blow is 12 yards away and he's at X and he's your speed dodger. So we probably want ball pressure, but let's make him a double move guy. So it's almost like a two-part approach. Like I get the first 10 yards are really aggressive and the last 2 yards have, more choppy step. And Jim Smith over here, he's catching the ball off of a skip pass from below GLE and he's catching the ball at 18 and you're coming, he's catching the ball at 16 and he's got 15-yard range and he's selling that. So you got to be prepared for a hitch or a split roll. So that's how I would teach the, technique, situational. And then when you start doing some of your, skip survivor or, skip stopper drill, you can now focus just on one piece instead of the three different elements of the guys on the perimeter and lunge pail. Does that make sense to you?
I think so, yeah. And I think it's a little different because, like you said, I mean, you said the words, each person does it a little differently depending on what's most comfortable for them. I mean, I got a chance to coach Garrett Epple, and he's like surgical with the way he just places his stick when he approaches, pretty much right on your sternum. But in watching, and I haven't gotten a chance to coach Matt Landis, but I've watched him a lot, and I did a webinar with him, and he gets set with his stick not as straight out. It's a little bit more maybe 45 degrees because I think he's getting ready to move his feet and get a bump on you. That's really where this question came to me, which is why I wanted to do those webinars with Glazner and Landis. I'm like, what is the difference? And I just didn't know. And then it started to occur to me that maybe it's a difference in scenarios. Like if you're guarding Jordan Wolf, you might as well just get ready to move. Whereas if you're rotating to somebody, in transition or on man down and they might shoot, you got to arrive with your poke. So I was just trying to wonder from your perspective.
Yeah, I think part of it was also like he was, listen, Garrett was unbelievably athletic too, but in a different way. And Sexton was unique in his own way as well. But like for just talking about like Landis versus Landis and Sexton, because they would both do a similar thing and they earned that right. So like a great example for both of those guys for Landis was when we would play the great Syracuse teams, they had Kevin Rice and Donahue and Randy Statz. And we had, or Notre Dame had, Epple, Landis, Glaze, and Steve O'Hara, right? So each of them, unbelievable, groups of all-American defensemen. And, Syracuse would, run just, because Coach Donahue was so good at the simplicity and the spacing, and we would call seesaw cuts, what I called what Syracuse did back when those guys were there. Kevin Rice would work to get to the island, and Stotts and less Stotts, but more like Marasco or Donahue coming from his left side, and they would create these little what I would call seesaw cuts because Kevin Rice could move 3 steps this way, 3 steps that way, and Donahue was so good inside and finding that space. And they, when Marasco was there, he'd be on the wing and they'd have a righty come in and fill, from a high position. They would, I would call it a 4 high or a 5 high, and they gave Marasco and and Kevin Rice the ability to get to the island and basically toy with the slide guy. They were good enough after a couple of moves to get underneath or get to the middle of the field on a guy, but you had to respect the fact that they were putting people in the crease at different angles that could play behind the head of the slide guy. So, relative to Landis on Rice is that Landis, I was such a V-hold guy, but Matt would have his stick at different angles because he was, trying to channel a guy a certain way, and he was athletic enough to be able to do that where he didn't have to be as militant with, the technique that I taught, that he could be at a different angle because he had the footwork. And then, we would try to push, almost not give him the island, but, force him up there and basically force him toward the sideline or force him toward the corner of the box. So that's why you see sometimes Matt's on a different angles, because I think he's such a confidence with his footwork. With a guy like Sexton, who was a different kind of athlete, much more instinctive. John had really good feet. He wasn't as agile as Matt, but John liked to trail to help create the takeaway opportunities. And John was he would trail, ride a guy, what I would call ride a guy's back.
Yeah.
Where it could be a butt, righty against righty, it could be butt end drive, and then he would bring it over and catch a guy as he turned, get it in there where the guy thought he was getting to a spot on the field that was really advantageous for him, and then John would bring it over and get that dig and that can opener check that he was so good at. And both of them did them. John was just spatial and the efficiency of how he moved and how he knew that if I could do this well, I'm going to create a situation where a guy's rolling back to his weak hand or getting caught in that exchange, strong hand to weak hand, and he would take advantage of those opportunities. So both of those guys were not the ideal technique like a guy like Glaze or Epple would have, but they both did them for reasons that they proved could work.
That's so interesting too, because I think that as a coach, there's things you want to teach, and it's like, listen, I want you to know how to do this, but oftentimes the athletes will figure out the best way also. And that's really what you're saying, is that they did learn the way that you wanted them to do it. But then eventually people learn how to do stuff that works for them. And it may work a little differently for them, than somebody else. But I know that I used to have, an issue, like wanting people to do it this way. What I really think is, they're like, yeah, learn it, because I need you to know this, but every player is going to be a little different.
And you don't want your guys to be robots. Right. And listen, coaches are control freaks, but losing an element of control, which I learned over time, it was not part of my personality, because you want to control every element. You want, if you have certainty that it has to be done this way. And I tell, we were talking about 3 perfect reps versus volume of reps in which 3 are perfect. Give me the volume, because there's so many ways to, you're getting to do it more, and you're getting to learn what's good and what's really good, and you're getting your teammates to coach for you. And I tell my guys all the time, it's like part of the growth defensively for our group here at Harvard was letting go. We were trying to exponentially speed up our, belief and acceptance in the way that we wanted to play defense. Is part of that, to speed that up, I had to even let go more. I had to let them do their own film sessions and teach them, get a group of guys who became, who got better at it faster, and then they could bring other guys along with them. And that, of all the great achievements that we had here in 7 or so months, is that, that fills me up, how hard they worked. But it started with me letting go, just out of, Ivy League rules and the amount that you can practice and what you're allowed to do in the fall, and, how that different that was coaching in the ACC. I had to do it, but the having to do it taught me that I can do that in the future as well. And doing it imperfectly helps guys learn maybe a different way that works with their skill set and their athleticism. So yeah, being open to that. There's certain things that are non-negotiable for sure, but you're not stamping guys off at an assembly line. They're humans. They're lefties, they're righties, they're tall, they're skinny, they're thick.
Yeah.
You know, you gotta be open to the fact that not everybody's going to 100% conform.
Not everybody's going to restrain themselves from going over a guy's head 2 steps after the goal line.
Yeah, you know, that picture in your you know, I think if that picture from Lake Placid is blown up, you know, I think I'm thinking about going over your head. I'm barely in that frame, I think, but if I was in that frame, that's what I was thinking.
Well, I'm going lefty there, Jerry, so I don't think you're going over my head quite yet.
I'll go the other way. I'll go reverse over that.
Oh, you will?
Right.
You'll go reverse over the head and then get me with the back
into a pencil, into the reach around, the whole thing.
Hey, Bergie, thanks a lot for coming on. I mean, I know this has been it continues to be such a trying time for so many. And I know we touched on the realities and stuff early in this, but I really wanted to be able to just talk lacrosse and have a little bit of fun. And I think we achieved that. So thanks for coming on.
Listen, I hope we can do, you know, we've got a lot of free time coming up. You know, we might have to do this, you know, once or twice a month. Who knows? Maybe the people will want it. You know, we got to make sure you know, our cultural references aren't too obscure. You know, I'm not sure if everyone got your Fletch reference, but you know, they should look it up.
It's all ball bearings these days, Jerry.
What was he doing up there? Stunt flying?
What do you need, a refresher course?
I saved his life during the war. Oh, you were in the war? No, got him out.
Hey, have a good one, buddy.
All right, next time, brother. Thank you.
Yeah, take care.
Take care.